Brandon Thurston from Wrestlenomics is up next, and we're going to follow Brandon with John Pollock from Post Wrestling.
Thank you, and good afternoon, everyone.
But we can't ignore the math, okay? We can't ignore the data.
Go on Google Trends, type in your name, then type in mine. You're a straight line, I'm a pyramid.
I like the very direct question on that.
Television ratings, downward spiral. Buy rates, plummeting.
The time is now to turn the math around.
Everybody, welcome to Pollock and Thurston, and it is with a heavy heart that the two of us announce that today is the final Pollock and Thurston at this hour, because next week we will be moving our show up to a 1 p.m. Eastern start time to accommodate the new schedule that John Pollock is being tasked with as my children go back to school, and Brandon showing his flexibility. 1 p.m. Eastern time, 10 a.m. on the West Coast, starting next Wednesday. So adjust accordingly. Let your superiors know your lunch hour will now be starting at 1 p.m., however you consume this show next week.
Yes. You should listen to it during lunch. Yes, you should. It'll be there for you in the middle of the day, a little bit earlier.
Then listen to it on both of our feeds after the fact. Make sure you got every comment in context. You understood every reference. You
like, thumbs up, subscribe, share it. Make your parents watch it. All of that. Your children too. Maybe most of the time.
Of course, that is the promotion we rely upon. On today's show, we have lots to talk about. Brandon has come into contact with documents. We're going to talk about lots of documents on the show. We're also going to be talking about All In, the fallout from All In, AEW's return to Wembley Stadium. When will they go back to Wembley Stadium? Question mark. How many people were at AEW All In? A question mark. But who is our guest today? Not a question mark. Neal Flanagan, the man that was on the ground at Wembley Stadium in person, covering it on behalf of Post Wrestling, made it into the press conference, and yes, Neal Flanagan getting on that mic and getting a pretty substantive answer out of one Tony Khan. So we're going to talk about all of that. Neal will join us in about a half hour's time here on the show. But Brandon, let us start off. We will get to some of your findings over the past week, including a triumph for journalism, a triumph for the wrestling media, spearheaded by one Brandon Thurston, who deserves all of the credit for fighting the state of Texas and coming out the victor with records and records and records on a Friday night this past week. But All In, just overall thoughts. Did you consume the show? Did you have a viewing experience of All In, or did you just tune in for the main event, i.e. the press conference?
I mainly watched the press conference and suffered through it. I did order the pay-per-view. I did have it on my television, I think sometimes at a low volume. I don't have strong takeaways about it. I don't have strong takeaways. It was a show that a lot of people were at. A lot of people seem to have enjoyed it. It seems to have done very well in terms of the critical reception. It drew, looks like, over 50,000 people. That's consistent with what WrestleTix has for the estimate of tickets distributed. And we did notably, we have an on-the-record comment from one Tony Khan saying over 50,000 plus sold. So although we didn't get a comment about the attendance, an announcement on the broadcast about attendance, we did not get no comments during the press conference about pay-per-view buys with a comparison to other pay-per-views without ever uttering a number. But he did say it was among the top two of the last year, so which I take to exclude last year's All In, which did about, we hear, 200,000 buys. Revolution, the Sting retirement show, did about 180, so it would put it in the high 100,000s, I guess, is what he's saying there.
Did it surprise you that there was not an attendance announcement? And if you are putting on one of your many hats, I'm going to ask you to put on your PR hat. You are playing Adam Hopkins. What would your advice have been given this number that you have drawn to Wembley Stadium? And would you have made the same decision to omit an announcement on the broadcast itself? And subsequently at the press conference too. We got the tweet from Tony Khan.
I'm always I would always push for let's be transparent. And if people want to do tweets that don't really matter, go for it. Yeah, I mean, why not announce it? Why not announce the number of tickets sold, which you did last year? I can understand the apprehension of not wanting to announce a number that is lower than, and 30,000 lower than the previous year. But I think that's kind of a very online choice to make.
I think it's such an example of exactly falling into, I would argue, a trap, that the idea that 50,000 plus could ever be painted as something to shy away from is, to me, just kind of losing the plot on what your core business is. It's making money. It is selling tickets and doing a multi-million-dollar gate that you have to imagine. This was a very, very healthy 7-figure gate that they generated on Sunday, and I would be trumpeting that fact and not worrying about discourse from what is a minority view that would be painting that as some kind of failure after the fact. But they chose not to make that announcement. But they did have several announcements on the pre-show about shows that will be coming up in 2025. That includes Grand Slam Australia, February the 15th at Suncorp Stadium, just outside of Brisbane, and next year's Forbidden Door, which will take place over the bank holiday weekend in London at a venue to be determined.
Yes. Do you think this means no Grand Slam, no returning to Grand Slam for Arthur Ashe Stadium, as they are going to Arthur Ashe Stadium in a couple of weeks with currently somewhere over 3,000 tickets distributed for a show that used to do 19,000, which last year did 11,000. It looks like, I don't know that they're going to draw half of the house that they did in the prior year. And the fact that they're using this brand, Grand Slam, for Australia, where I'm sure they're going to draw more strongly than they will in a couple of weeks here in New York City.
I would say that the Arthur Ashe run maybe comes to an end after this year. I think we are going to have one of the most aggressive pushes over this next couple of weeks for this Arthur Ashe Stadium show. As I recall, last year's show was kind of just trailing along, and it was looking like it wasn't going to be the most attended show. And we did get, as I recall, I would have to double back and look at the ticket movement, but there was plenty in those final couple of weeks. We'll see if they can take a lot of this goodwill from this show coming out of Sunday and what the match announcements are, and see how aggressive they are, especially in that New York market, if they can get Arthur Ashe Stadium to a higher level. I would say, though, best case scenario, I mean, like 10,000 seems like well beyond reach for a show that, as you stated, is under 4 at the moment. So yeah, long answer. I would state that, maybe Arthur Ashe Stadium is somewhere that you can go to down the road, but next year maybe not so much.
And I think this is, so now they've got 2 international pay-per-views coming up in 2025, right? With London and Australia here, Brisbane. So I feel like that's probably the strategy for them as far as international shows. And maybe you have, as they did in Cardiff, maybe you have a Dynamite the week or the few days before the pay-per-view. But that seems like the fit strategy for them to run international locations for a pay-per-view, because I don't think it would be quite worth it to go over there to do a Dynamite or do a couple Dynamites, and they don't do house shows, so there's no house show tour to do. So I guess the way to do it is to maybe run a Grand Slam in Australia one year. Maybe I know it looks like they're going to do a London show. He says he's going to go back to Wembley Stadium, correct, for 2026. That's been made clear, I think. Maybe not Wembley Stadium, but at least in London. So I feel like that's the thing to do. And maybe I don't know what the markets would be after that. Maybe Germany, maybe France.
What is the case for and against the idea of taping several TVs in Europe next year? Like, are you looking at such a cost on top of the fact, what do you feel the attitude is going to be into, look, across broadcasters of tape television, that I think there's still a sensitivity to that. The offset being like one of the better TVs we had last week with that Cardiff crowd that just, to me, really boosted this product going into its pay-per-view with a really hot television both nights with Dynamite and Collision. Do you see it just being something that is there's too much cost attached when we're talking multiple episodes being taped?
If it's just a Dynamite and a Collision, maybe that makes sense. But are you drawing enough incremental ticket revenue that it doesn't make more sense to stay in the United States, I guess? If we're going beyond a week or something like that, then you're talking about putting all of your staff and talent in hotels for a long time because they're not
I'm saying
going back to
the
their homes.
idea of, you do 2 nights of TV that cover your 2 weeks, and then maybe you follow up with like 3 live events. So we're talking like a 5-day tour of some sort, and you do 2 weeks of TV, but then you do have you're taping that many weeks in advance.
Yeah, maybe that makes sense. And I think the answer is always like, what does your TV partner say? What do the Kathleen Finches of the world think of that? And if they're fine with it, then and if it makes enough sense financially, then sure.
Or the Channing Dungies of the world.
That's right. Yes, starting soon, I think, in next year calendar year.
Well, that does tie into an announcement that came out this morning that for the first time, WWE is going to do an episode of Raw in Riyadh, Saudi Arabia. They will do Crown Jewel on November the 2nd, which is a Saturday. And the next day, they will tape Raw, I understand, to air on Monday night in the US. So this will be, they did SmackDown the last time over there, which was a first for doing TV there. And this time around, it'll be flipped with Raw being taped in Riyadh on the Sunday.
Yeah. Those crowds have been pretty hot too, right? But that'll be the first time. I wonder, and we didn't get an answer last time or any news that came out of answering, is there any incremental financial benefit or other benefit towards agreeing to do an extra day of TV here? Is this changing this $50 million to $60 million or something like that?
I would think they're not doing this out of the goodness of their heart to just stay an extra day and produce television in Saudi Arabia if a figure was not attached to that. But it's it just continues like the navigation into more and more in that part of the world that I think the UFC is going to be exploring very heavily in 2025. Dana White the other night just had stated that they see themselves doing a lot more with Riyadh season, whether it be sponsorship and even leaving it vague that there could be other ideas on the table with, of course, Riyadh season is footing a big part of this ever expanding bill for UFC Noche at the Sphere in a couple of weeks that Dana White has now stated has hit $20 million in costs for this event on September 14th.
And I see it was His Excellency himself, Turki Al-Sheikh, who made this announcement.
There you have it. Well, wrestling fan, obviously, wanting to bring 3 hours of Raw to Saudi Arabia.
Yes.
Before we have Neal on, we've got to talk about what I think is, honestly, the guy's not going to pat himself on the back, but this was a really, a strong pursuit of transparency through the eyes of Brandon Thurston, who sought out information related to the 2023 Royal Rumble from the city of San Antonio, where they hosted the Royal Rumble event at the Alamo Dome a year and a half ago. And Brandon, how shortly after this event did you first seek out records for this event?
I sent a records request, I believe, that night to the city of San Antonio, which it occurred to me that would be the appropriate party to send a public records request to, because the Alamo Dome is owned and operated by the city of San Antonio.
So this began around 18 months ago for Brandon. In April of 2023, there was an initial ruling that you were not going to have access to this information, correct? Through the city's objection?
Yes. This is really the Super Bowl of wrestling journalism here that we're about to walk through. And I think there appears to be a problem with our view counter, because this is like, I'm sure there's like 120 million people watching right now. Not the 700 and some odd that we got here. So they did rule initially, and they did credit to them. They did comply with the law and released to me some of the records that I was requesting. And we got a substantial report out of that in terms of reporting that it was a $7.3 million gate for Royal Rumble in 2023. Over 40,000 tickets sold, average ticket price $164. We got emails showing a W employee, really urging the city employees to give them more numbers so they could have a bigger attendance to announce the infamous heartbeat count and all of that. So we did get a substantial amount of information from them, but what we didn't get was the site fee that W executives, TKO executives have been talking about is such a big growth opportunity for them. This often happens now, since I've done a number of requests to the Texas, to various Texas entities. They will claim that some of the information that you're requesting, yeah, that can be released, but there's this other information that we want to check with the Attorney General and see if we can withhold that under the number of exceptions that are in the public records law in Texas. And it's always a different records law in all these states for the most part. Some even have a city level. I think the Troy, Ohio request had city level laws. But anyway, they did rule that, yeah, you can withhold this because it's a trade secret. And this was the city itself submitting this request for review. WWE was not pushing to withhold it, but was the city was basically saying, "Oh, WWE might. They are reserving the right to object to this." But the city did request it, and the city got approval to withhold this particular record.
So at this point in April, I mean, Brandon, you're probably thinking, man, there's a chance maybe WWE is going to step in and say, no, give these to Brandon. I mean, he needs to know this. What Brandon was seeking was the attendance, sales, and communications between the city and WWE. So this comes out April 2023, and it's appearing that you are not going to get access to the information you have requested. Now,
Yes.
someone, the mysterious entity that I know you have tried to find the identity of, another entity also sought out this information. This, we believe, not a journalist, but rather this was a company that may or may not have been related to a lawsuit involving WWE that was seeking these records as well.
Yeah, so there's some firm called Intelligence Options that it looks like was doing research for one of the WWE lawsuits that was happening at the time. I think it's most likely that it was the antitrust lawsuit that MLW had filed against WWE. I did ask in February Court Bauer whether he knew anything about it. He didn't. I think it's possible he just didn't know anything about it. He's not maybe intimately involved in all the details that were involved in that antitrust lawsuit, as Caswitz Benson Torres was defending them. But it just makes the most sense because they were seeking the request was seeking leases and contracts and things like that. That would have made sense if you were building a case of antitrust violation against WWE, and it's consistent with the description that this lawsuit was settled at the point at which this was reviewed again, and the ruling was reversed. The ruling for me was reversed and saying, yes, you do have to release this contract that will reveal the site fee and all of that. And they said that, well, this lawsuit has been settled now, so it's that this party doesn't need it. Obviously, it's moot. So it was left to me to say, well, yeah, I do still want it.
And they did give you the option to just walk away, and you said, no, I would like this information. And things proceeded because the Office of the Attorney General, they ended up reversing the initial decision, correct? And thus this was like a 180, where now they were in conflict with the city of San Antonio and WWE, who would file a complaint to try and block this information from coming out. And that's where you've been at the standstill for the last number of months. And we were wondering if Attorney General Ken Paxton was even going to respond to this complaint. And he waited right until the buzzer was about to go and made his response. And the lawsuit is still ongoing that WWE filed. But this past Friday, your inbox was populated by a number of documents that came your way. So we don't exactly know now what is WWE fighting, but this lawsuit is still ongoing, correct?
The docket is still here, and there's no like voluntary dismissal or something like that. And so to be clear, exactly what happened here is that it's this lawsuit that they filed was to stop the city from being forced to release the document, the contract. Let's talk about the contract, which is basically what this new report is about. This was to stop them from the city from having to release the contract between WWE and the city. And as I did more research and understood more about Texas Public Records Law and the Texas Event Trust Program, which WWE used for WrestleMania in 2022, which WWE used, well, the LOC, the local organizing committee used to attract WWE to bring WrestleMania to the Dallas Arlington area. They have this program in Texas that, if you apply to the state government and say, we're going to bring this great event that's going to have all this positive economic impact to the local area, the state government will help you pay for that event. So as I was going through that and learning more, I realized, well, the city has the contract, but they're probably not the only party that has the contract, because if you're trying to attract the Royal Rumble, you may be willing to use local city funds to promise an incentive or a site fee. But what you would probably do if you're the city of San Antonio is you would turn to the state government and say, I want to use the event trust program where the state government will help me, get even more money to attract WWE with. So I figured, well, the office of the governor, naturally, as one always realizes, the office of the governor probably has a copy of this contract as well, because you have to present all of these records to the state government to say this is what we're paying for. So it's all properly justified. So by the time this lawsuit had happened, I said, well, let's see what happens if I request the office of the governor. And I was transparent. I wasn't trying to pull a fast one. I wrote right in the request, look, there's a lawsuit happening. Here's the case number. So the office of the governor was requested by me to release that information to me, and of course that went to Attorney General review also, and everybody put their arguments in. The city of San Antonio objected, and WWE objected, and the office of the governor objected, but the Attorney General finally ruled on July 25th that no, you do have to release certain information. And some of this is obscured to me because they're referring to various attachments which are withheld from me as the requester, because naturally that's the review process. If I saw them, it would essentially be releasing them to me. So they're referring to these exhibits and these attachments. So I can't quite tell what they're referring to. Some things are still being allowed to be withheld. I can't tell you what those things are because I just haven't seen and I don't know. But the Attorney General did rule that certain information had to be released to me. That was on July 25th. I did not. It's not like the Attorney General emailed me and said, yes, we have ruled this. I was just looking through the Attorney General's review database and trying to find my issue, and I found
Paxton didn't send you a DM. Say, hey, what's
Ken
up, Brandon?
Ken didn't send me one. But I found it like 4 days later on the 29th, I think. And so I emailed the public records person with the office of the governor right away. I was like, please send me this stuff. And they replied a few days later saying, okay, we will by August 8th. August 8th arrived, and I received another email from one Kieran Hillis saying that, oh, wait, actually, we have to check with the AG again for clarification to make sure it's legal to release this to you. And I believe, if my understanding of the law is correct, they have 30 days from the AG's ruling within which they have to release this information, or somebody's got to sue and intervene to stop this, which they could have done. The office of the governor could have done. The city maybe could have done. WWE could have done again. But nobody did that. And then on the 25th, which was Friday, I finally got a PDF. Well, what I got was basically like a Dropbox link. It was not Dropbox, but it was some other Dropbox like thing. And I had to like sign up for a free trial and go through more friction. But finally I did download this PDF. And then we do have the contract, which we'll show on the screen here. If I told John when I got it, I should probably frame this and put it on the wall.
Yeah, you're going to need 17 frames to put this on multiple walls, it looks like.
Yes. But so why is this, as people have inquired with me politely, of course, only, why do you care about this? Why is this important at all? We do know, here's the information that we learned. The site fee was $250,000 cash. But in addition to that, San Antonio also, with help from the state government, provided over $500,000 of incentives in total, because they basically allowed them to use the venue for free. They paid for various services and labor that was associated with running the Royal Rumble. If they claim, actually Tampa claimed the next year that the economic impact was $69 million. So the response is that, look, they got a many times return on their investment for the local economy. It seems quite likely. It's hard to debate that, even just looking at what the incremental hotel use would be and the luxury tax that's involved with that this is probably a very profitable return on investment for the city and the local area. And I think the real question here is, what was WWE trying to do by suing? What was the benefit for WWE to sue the AG to try to withhold this? And I think it's probably to try to create a precedent so that there could be less transparency around what the prices for these kinds of events are, so that they could get a better price, a higher price for themselves in the future, and maybe delaying and obfuscating what the deal was with San Antonio. Maybe that helps them make a deal with Indiana. I don't know, because the deal with Indiana for various PLEs was made in the meantime throughout all this. But I think maybe most of all, it was worth maybe tens of thousands of dollars in legal fees that they paid to Holland Knight, who was their law firm for this. It was probably worth the shot to try to create a legal precedent that you could say in future cases like this, hey, look, the Texas case over here ruled that this does qualify for this exemption and this exemption, and your exemption is very similarly worded. We get to withhold this. And there's still a lawsuit here, so they could still try to, maybe that's why the lawsuit is still worth fighting. I did ask WB, I did ask W's lawyer for this case, and got no responses.
Yeah, and to also clarify for those that maybe haven't followed this in grand detail, and who isn't, Brandon was not sued in the middle of this. They were attempting to stop this information from getting to Brandon, but the argument that WWE made on behalf of Chris Legentil was in the complaint: if this information was made publicly available and Brandon Thurston was permitted to publicize our financial information and negotiated terms on Wrestlenomics, WWE would lose our bargaining power in negotiating all of our live events and much of the value of a bidding process for venues. So my question to you, Brandon, is, do you see that as a argument that could impact WWE, or were you thinking...
Words of Murray Hodgson, I don't buy it. Or was I thinking what?
That you don't buy it.
The words of Murray Hodgson. Does this impact them? I guess they must think it is, because it will. They must think it's worth pursuing in some regard, because they spent, lawyers aren't cheap or free. I'm sure they spent thousands, maybe tens of thousands of dollars to have a lawyer sue the government for this. So they must believe.
Do you think that there's more records, or do you feel you've gotten everything attached to this event that you're going to receive? Have you been given any indication there's more?
I don't know exactly what's been withheld. The one thing that I do see in the records that were released to me is something called an event support agreement, which appears to be an additional contract between the city or the Alamodome and WWE. I do have like 2 or 3 pages of that. It seems to be more than 2 or 3 pages. So, we would have to look through the letter, the July 25th Attorney General letter, because they're talking about certain things we're going to let the lawsuit decide. Certain things can be withheld under certain exemptions. Certain things do have to be released, which apparently they were. What else could I really gain here, or what other information is there? I'm not sure. But I feel like we have the whole story, at least as far as like the initial story of like what was the Royal Rumble, what was the price of the Royal Rumble in 2023? What did the Alamodome pay the city, etc. Is there more of a story in terms of why were they trying to withhold and what are they trying to withhold? Maybe, but I feel like we have most of the story now.
I think in time you could have, this. So many people are going to see graphics of the U.S. map over the next few months, and it's going to be divided into red and blue. I think there could be a Wrestlenomics version that is either states that are green or red to determine transparency when it comes to their local governments and event coordinators when it comes to
I would expect
information.
You're going to have a pretty strong correlation between the red states and those that are transparent when it comes to public information, public records law. Florida and Texas have very strong public records laws, as I have learned, especially Florida in recent times. And I think that's maybe it's just a more libertarian philosophy that does coincide with really strong transparency about the philosophy that these are the people's records, and there should be very few hurdles in the way of the people being able to obtain those records and review them for themselves and to judge whether or not their government is doing a good job. I want to say too, what's the point of all this? It's to get transparency. Why? Because it should lead to fairer pricing. WWE was very eager to withhold this information, apparently to its own economic benefit.
These are
Why
public
shouldn't
funds at their core. Like, I think if you're a Texas citizen, like, yeah, maybe securing a Royal Rumble event is not your number one priority, but I think it is at least transparent for you, the taxpayer, of just getting a sense of what goes into these shows that are being brought, and that you are going to be hit with marketing and promotional material, and knowing, how is an event like the Royal Rumble affecting my local economy if I am in and around the San Antonio area.
Yeah, I just want to be very clear that this isn't like, I think a lot of WWE diehards who are, embroiled in a tribal war think that I was like trying to dig up something scandalous, and that's not my expectation or intent. My intent is to drive for transparency so that we know what these events are worth, and we are getting a fairly clear picture about, okay, WrestleMania is worth a lot. We see WrestleMania worth somewhere around 5 million. That's what Las Vegas is reportedly paying. We see that the Royal Rumble is about $500,000. SummerSlam is a few 100,000, maybe 300,000. We don't have a very recent example of SummerSlam, but we've got one from several years back in 2021 that was 330. So we're getting kind of an idea. And then there's these international events that are sort of in between. They're definitely not WrestleMania, but they are worth more than even the Royal Rumble, where we've got Puerto Rico paying 1.5 million in cash, and then some in-kind value on top of that. You've got the Cardiff show overseas paying, it looks like $2.8 million, according to basically what they implied in their press release. So why shouldn't governments who are using taxpayer dollars get a fairer deal rather than a less fair deal? I think that's an important thing to have out there. And I think it's something that investors are benefited to know. How much money, how much revenue is WWE able to gain here? How much of an opportunity really is this? While Mark Shapiro talks about how big of an opportunity it is, well, we're getting a clearer idea of that.
We're going to shift gears, but if anyone wants to send in any super chats about the city of San Antonio or any other related topics to that story, you are welcome to do so. But we are now bringing in our international correspondent, the man who left his home of Northern Ireland and traveled with his pen and paper to Wembley Stadium, where he was part of the assembled media, Neal Flanagan, our man, who is here with us. Neal, you have had a safe trip back home, I assume?
Oh yes, the huge trek from Belfast to London, the 55-minute flight that it takes to get there. But yes, home in one piece, and had a great time. And thanks for having me on, guys. I hope you note I'm wearing my Pollock and Thurston shirt and under t-shirt uniform for this.
Is it Pollock and Thurston shirt?
Well, you both normally wear a button-up shirt.
I see.
For this show.
I thought there was
You're
some
not
royalties
today,
that I wasn't
Brandon. But I know.
I am. There is a collar. You just can't tell because it's so dark.
Yes.
Oh, I see. Of course,
there is a collar.
No such thing as a casual Wednesday, Neal. First of all, just tell me a bit about the experience of. Have you gone to other sporting events at Wembley Stadium in the past? And if so, just tell me a bit about like the atmosphere at this for a wrestling specific show at Wembley, or was this your first time there?
It was my first time at Wembley, full stop. Even the old Wembley, where famously the Live Aid concert and all sorts of huge footballing and other sporting events have taken place. I have never been to Wembley because I've never been to an FA Cup final or any of the sort of things that might draw me there. So first time there, but the atmosphere was tremendous. And it goes to something that you were talking about right at the beginning of the show, which is this unnecessary mystery over the exact turnstile count or paid attendance. I don't get it. I don't understand it. Anything over 50,000 people, even in a cavernous facility like Wembley, is a big draw. And there was a great atmosphere. And I don't understand the reluctance to just give an exact paid ticket count on the gate. In the press conference, we'll come to this, I guess. It didn't escape my attention that this had not come up by the time the mic was being passed around, but I thought, well, surely he's going to say so. I mean, I don't want to waste a question on something obvious. Perhaps it's already gone out in social media. Yes, and an interesting one. But to more directly answer your question, the atmosphere was absolutely tremendous, and the press facilities are very good at Wembley because you're kind of very, very close to the crowd. You're at the back of the 100 section at the south end of the stadium. There is a little roof above you. There is a narrow table in front of you where you could set a laptop. And there are little sort of 9-inch monitors so you can see the television production as well as what's happening around you. But you're about 2 feet away from the fans in front. So you can really take in what they take in at the same time. And they were loud, they were very raucous, very engaged, which I guess is what you would expect in that market, given that it's their second time running it. The attendance was down on last year. And let's face it, wrestling is still somewhat of a niche sport. And in the UK market, it's, their weekly television isn't broadcast live. Collision and Dynamite aren't on linear TV live. It's shown a couple of days later, late at night. And even at that, with the region of which ITV region that you live in, the timing of the show will vary. I think it's on at 9 p.m. on Fridays in some parts of the UK. Not where I live. It's on at nearer to like 1 a.m. or something like that. So given all of those factors in the market that you're working within, 50 plus tremendous result. I think I'd be trumpeting it if I were Tony.
Yeah, Neal, did you get any sense of how much there were people from outside the UK or outside of Europe who were attending this? I'm wondering does that make up a big part of the difference between this year and last year in terms of attendance?
I don't have hard figures, of course, Brandon. It's really based only
You didn't count at the gates?
I didn't stand there with a clicker.
We were going to send him a clicker, but we didn't get it there in time through customs. So we were going to have him right at the front gate to click.
I did quiz a few people though, and nearly everyone was that I spoke to was from the UK. There were a couple of Danish people that I got speaking to, but my sense was from speaking to people who had been there last year that there was a larger contingent of international visitors in 2023 than this year.
I think last year what it had going for it was it was the spectacle of AEW, as we've talked about, like selling history to people and wanting to be part of it. Like that is so much of it in and of itself that this year, I still think you absorbed some of that this year, but it wasn't going to be able to replicate year one. You have an interesting background, Neal, because you have a history working in journalism, but this was the first time you had a wrestling specific assignment. And I'm just kind of curious, you wrote about this on the site that I encourage people to read about, but just sort of you follow a lot of wrestling media. You've heard about these press conferences and being in these media settings. And I just want to know what your firsthand experience was like, if it's consistent with what you expected going in.
It was somewhat consistent with expectations, just because we live in an era where you can see these press conferences, streamed. But nothing beats being there for being able to sort of get a real time. For example, as the show wore on, my potential avenues for a question shifted. I wondered about asking around the television deal. There had been some scuttle online whether or not there would be an announcement about that this past weekend. But I came to the conclusion that would be a waste of time. We've on the various media calls, and really any time that Tony's asked about this, to cut it short, when he's ready to announce the TV deal, he'll announce it, I guess, and no one's going to be able to pry that out of him ahead of time. So I felt that would be a waste.
Actually, Neal, it's a 5-year deal, and here are the exact money figures. It's going to have a streaming component to it, and and we're adding 2 hours as well. Thanks for the question.
I know, I'm glad you asked. So yeah, there's nothing quite too prepare you for when the mic is just handed to you. You don't know when that's going to happen. You put your hand up to indicate. And the press guys are floating around, and suddenly the microphone is thrust there. And so I will admit that I wasn't 100% happy with my question. I think the preamble could have been half the length. The question itself could have been somewhat focused, but I was delighted with the answer because it went on for nigh on, it felt like 20 minutes. And he was looking at me in the eyes the entire time, even by the point when he was getting to the history of taking the Jags to Wembley Stadium in 2013. And I had to sort of sit there going, Tony. So I was very pleased with the answer, and it is an area I'm interested in. I think that it goes to what was being talked about on this show last week. You know, where are the weak points really with AEW at the moment, and what are the myriad theories and you know, behind why the attendances aren't what they were, and the live gates to go along with that, and the television audiences. And as Brandon has pointed out, even accounting for fewer households having cable, which has been an excuse, I think, is a fair way to put it.
Yeah, so there's
Tony
cable ratings that will show that even when you account for the fewer number of households that TNT and TBS are in, Dynamite, for one, is still down a few percent.
Yeah. And I think one of the theories that I subscribe to, at least, is that pro wrestling fans of whatever stripe, whether it's WWE or AEW or both, for the most part, want good creative. They want good storylines as well as good in-ring content. It's what elevates, you know, a really good in-ring match to a classic, is to give it that build. And I felt, you know, you talked about hats earlier on, John, wearing my fan hat, that they'd done a much better job this year than last, particularly with both of the World Championship programs, but in other parts of the card as well. And so, you know, is this sustainable with the pay-per-view schedule that they've got coming up in 2025, the expansions there? You know, I was curious as to the process and whether there'd been any changes of philosophy in that. So I thought he gave a detailed answer. I was interested in the philosophy that he sort of outlined, that it was, you know, a sport, that there were 20 some odd, 27, 30 people pitching him ideas, that he was the gatekeeper, you know, all of that was very interesting to me. So that speaks, I suppose, to the in-person aspect of being at the press conference. The first press conference I've attended in many, many years, because as you alluded to, my first full-time career was as a newspaper journalist, and in a different era. I'm not quite the guy in that thumbnail with the fedora with a little card in the brim.
This wasn't an actual picture of you?
No. But the new media has come on so much since the days when I began. You know, I did have to learn shorthand as part of my journalism training, because digital, or affordable at least, digital handheld recorders weren't really readily available. What we had was the old dictaphone with the miniature tape machine in it that lasts for maybe 15 minutes. So we had to learn shorthand. There was no live streaming component at a press conference. People were generally just yelling at an awful lot. That's why in that piece I felt, well, that was an avenue I could go down, is the difference between my experience as a jobbing journalist at kind of the turn of the millennium in sort of early 2000s, as opposed to now, where actually, the great Andrew Thompson is doing a better job than I could at the event of putting stories up in a timely manner on the site.
Yeah.
Of course, yeah. And he has access to commentary, for one thing, which I don't do. And sometimes you're getting news from that. So I had to think of, well, what can I add value to in the in-person experience that can't be done on a more immediate level by somebody just consuming it through streaming?
Yeah, I want to talk a little about his response to your question, which I think was one of the more newsworthy items that we got out of that press conference, where he said there's a lot of ideas, and the cool part is we have there's probably 27 to 30 people in any given week that will come in with different ideas, trying to contribute different parts, and he compares it to a football team. And actually, when I was searching, trying to find his quote, I found just now a quote from him from Tony Khan from 2021, the end of 2021, where he says he uses the same number. I don't have 27 Hollywood writers sitting around writing sketch comedy for the show. I think he's maybe taking a shot at WWE there. We do great wrestling matches, the wrestling that a lot of people in Jacksonville and the Southeast grew up on. That's the wrestling I grew up on and love it. Were you surprised by that number, or do you sense that there has been a difference in in AEW's creative that is reflective of having more people contributing to the creative process?
My sense in the very recent past, and I'm really talking about the build to All In, is that there'd been an uptick in the quality of the creative process. And that's what I was kind of trying to drive at. I think it's worth pointing out to those who aren't in the know, and I know this is all a bit inside baseball, but when you ask a question at a press conference, one of the media handlers, removes the microphone from you when you finished. There's no scope for follow-ups. If I could
were they actually holding the microphone throughout?
I got to hold it.
You got to hold it. Okay.
I got to hold it for the
WNAW have been doing that lately. They've been holding the microphone. You don't get to touch the microphone. They hold it for you.
And I think that's a good thing for people out there to know. It's the camera isn't necessarily on the questioner. I believe it wasn't at all at the AEW press conference.
I don't think AEW has ever put the camera on.
I don't think WWE was doing that, and I don't really go back to watch these as much anymore. But I don't think they do that anymore either. So you're not even necessary. They do ask you, the WWE one, to identify yourself and your outlet, but it's typically
they put us on camera at the Royal Rumble. That's the last time I can remember them doing that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I certainly have some vague memory of the press pack being on camera, but not lately. And I think it's a good thing for people to know that you don't get the scope for follow-ups and so on. But one of them would have been, who are these 27? He did mention Pat Buck, he mentioned Jimmy Jacobs, he mentioned Chris Daniels. But my assumption would be an awful lot of the talent, the EVPs and so on, are also in that almost 30 odd people. Jericho, I guess, gets to do largely what he wants, for example.
On follow-ups, I guess if you're watching, I guess this is the extreme. If you're watching a political press conference with a political official or something like that, I think you will see, whether or not a microphone is there, you'll see people shouting out questions, and eventually they'll focus on one person. I suppose even if they took the microphone away from you, you could shout a follow-up question. Would that be appropriate? Objectively speaking, I'm sure people would in the right context be mad online, because they're always mad at people for asking scrutinizing questions. Would that be appropriate in a wrestling press conference, or is wrestling just such a it's a lighter side of culture, and it doesn't really call for that?
I felt reading the room, it certainly wouldn't have been appropriate for me, and
it would have been unusual.
And possibly out of character for me as a person as well, to kind of hold up, especially since I took so long to get my question out, in the first place. But
the UFC ones, I'll say that, at least the last one I went to, with all night long, you had the media there, they would bring in the fighters, and this extended to Dana as well, was you got the mic and you get to do a mini interview almost. I got as much as everyone focused on.
It seems like you get consecutive questions.
Yeah, I got multiple questions in with all the subjects. The exchange everyone focused on with me and Dana, that continued for I had another 2 questions or so after that. We had a whole discussion about the TV rights and working with WWE, that all.
He was totally civil and thoughtful with you.
Yeah. Oh, we were. It was completely fine. That's why I didn't really look at it as anything afterwards. But then I woke up on Sunday. But yeah, I think for those, they're much more casual as opposed to at least my experiences at the WWE and AEW ones, where it's pretty much you get your question in and out, and then it's on to the next one. And we should, especially for the WWE ones, they are broadcasting these live, and you do know that they are trying to hit an end time on these as well. AEW, it's a bit more lax though.
Yeah, and again, going back to my sort of early days as a newspaper reporter, the political press conferences, particularly at that time in Northern Ireland, were very common, and I'd get sent to those, and that was a shouting match. You know, it was free for all, and once you got pointed out, you did have the floor for a bit. I felt that what I was at on Sunday night was a world away from that. It's a very controlled environment. I think there's a sense you only get from being in the room that there are people there, even from outlets like the Times of London, you know, who are there. A lot of the people in that room are there to cover, I think, what they see as entertainment, and that is a different lane than others. So reading the room, as I say, I think a shouted follow-up would have been not only exposing myself or anyone else who did it to online abuse, but probably a bit of peer, if not abuse, then displeasure, you know, from some of the other
that doesn't happen
reporters.
in wrestling, Neal. No, yeah, I think you're confusing this. That doesn't happen. Everyone's very respectful and understanding of these press conferences. Did you receive any feedback or reaction after the press conference, or did it, like, there was a lot of attention, I think, on your the answers you generated, but did you see anything of people identifying you?
Not much. I on a slightly different tangent from that, I did get to say hello to people. I met Stephanie Chase for the first time. She's from the same part of the world as I am, and we've been ships in the night at various events. Not least the Newark anniversary show, which I was supposed to be at and missed. So it was very nice to introduce myself and sit and have a chat with Stephanie. That was before the show even started, though. At the end of the press conference, there wasn't much in the way of interaction between the media. It was, I think, people were running for the last train at that point. It was after midnight. And I was quite close to the front end of what is a very large press conference suite at Wembley, which is why there was no green or yellow system, John. If you were there, if you were credentialed, you were escorted to the press
I think
room.
that's how it's always been when I've gone to AEW shows. Is that I think everybody who got a press pass got to go to the press conference at AEW.
But again, they don't allow, to the best of my knowledge, fans to pay to go into the press conferences wearing, you know, full Randy Savage get up. So
No, they don't.
No,
I've not seen that yet, but I mean, there's maybe a missed revenue opportunity there for AEW.
Those seats can be filled elsewhere. I'll end it off on this. The plan is, of course, to go back to London next August over the bank holiday weekend. What do you think is a ideal venue for them for that? They have not announced a building yet. Would you be looking at like an O2 arena, for instance, something of that kind of level of arena to run?
that's absolutely my first reaction. Is probably the O2 Arena would be where we'll see Forbidden Door. He's already been clear that London is his home. It's one of his hometowns. He likes to go back to London. You know, we can be pretty clear it's going to be in London. The O2 seems like a shoe-in to me. You know, I don't think it'll be, as much as there's been some speculation about Craven Cottage, which is Fulham FC's home ground. I don't think it'll be a stadium. I think it'll be an arena. I think it'll do well there as well. And just, I think it's a good idea also to take a year away from London for the big stadium, the big Wembley Stadium show. I believe if AEW hasn't confirmed it, Wembley Stadium has tweeted that we will see you in 2026. So I think we're safe in the notion that All In will be back at Wembley in 2026. And I think it's also wise to take a year off from the market in that respect for a stadium of that scale. Will
you be free that holiday weekend?
I imagine so.
Okay, well, you You don't need to take the whole year off, but we will have to. You are the European correspondent, so we will likely be relying on you next summer. But great work, Neal. There's an article up at postwrestling.com with Neal going through his firsthand experience going to cover All In at Wembley Stadium, and of course you can catch Neal's work at postwrestling.com, and he will be back on our channel Saturday early afternoon, evening his time, after Bash in Berlin with Wei Ting for a review. So you, again, the European correspondent.
Great to join you guys. Much appreciated, and appreciate the courage.
Thanks,
Very
Neal.
nice. Thank you, Neal. All right. Well, everyone, that was Neal Flanagan, who was there at All In over the weekend. We have a few other stories to go through before we wrap things up, including Tuesday. Brandon, you and I did not get invited, but there was a WWE Town Hall meeting.
Well, it's for employees.
Oh, okay. That's
Yes.
why. Well,
Yes.
nonetheless, so there was some conjecture about what exactly came up in this town hall meeting.
And maybe not even all employees, because I've heard that some people just didn't even know about it.
Yeah, I spoke to some that they weren't present for it, and they have not got a chance to go and like watch it online, where they do typically make these available to employees. But I guess the big subject coming out of this was the fate of the WWE Performance Center. And there was word about what is going on in relation to Las Vegas and the UFC Apex. Of course, NXT staged a show there a couple of months ago. It certainly would be in line with cost synergies when you have these two very similar operating structures to condense into one. But it would appear through Fightful's reporting that there's no imminent plan of shutting down the PC, shuffling everyone over to Las Vegas. But I wouldn't say it's like this foregone, like I wouldn't be dismissing this out of hand that Las Vegas is somewhere in the trajectory that they have to naturally be looking at, just given the like post-merger and looking at these two. Like we've discussed it, and you would have to think that they are looking at long-term options too when it comes to running these two structures in opposite parts of the country.
Yes. So we've heard that there's been some disagreement about or speculation about whether there even was a town hall involving Mark Shapiro, the TKO COO. We've both heard that there was a meeting, some sort of employee meeting involving Mark Shapiro. I was told that there was a meeting involving Paul Levesque and Nick Khan, and Mark Shapiro took questions. Would love to know if he actually said anything or was asked something about the PC, and whether or not you could see, as you said, when you're thinking about cost cutting, and that's part of the reason why this merger was presented as such a good idea to investors, is that you're able to merge live events teams, and you're able to use the services of Endeavor to replace so many things that WWE was doing on its own, etc. And that why would we have, you could see the thought, why do we have an Orlando Performance Center over here when we already have this great facility, the Apex in Las Vegas? Why is that not just one facility? But there's no imminent plans of that. But I would love to know what the actual quote was, if there was any quote at all that Mark Shapiro said related to this.
Yeah, what had come out was WrestleVotes had a tweet about this. Dave Meltzer had written, "Waiting for more from WWE." This was on Tuesday afternoonish. "Waiting for more from WWE, but Mark Shapiro did a town hall meeting in Stanford, and Vegas will be a developmental location, maybe replacing Orlando or in addition." And he followed that up stating, "Those in WWE said at the meeting Shapiro talked about Vegas, the growth of Vegas as a sports market in recent years, and that WWE should have a presence, didn't say developmental moving there."
Yes.
And then Fightful came out with a report last night as well, kind of stopping the notion that there was any kind of imminent move, which was obviously going to be
this would affect the lives of hundreds of people probably who are
oh
living
sure,
in
like if
Orlando,
you are
Orlando
based out
area.
of it's not even those that are just like day to day, but the amount of roster members that are based in Florida and do like rehab there, and that's where they go for training and such. Like there is so much centered in Florida. Like that's a gigantic move, but one that you can't dismiss as something that I am sure has been at least brought up, and that these are these are buildings that turned out to be very fortuitous for both companies during the pandemic, but long term, we'll see what is next. Does it at all? We've seen several UFC apexes start to pop up. They had opened one in Mexico. Like, do you see this as something that's going to be explored on the WWE or even like UFC end? It just seems like very counter to a lot of what they're doing. These ideas of like launching these facilities in different parts of the world.
In Mexico, for one, I can't see it unless they sort of infiltrated themselves into the lucha libre scene there, which would mean having a deep relationship with an existing lucha libre Mexican wrestling organization, because that's, I mean, I'm sure, if a lot of their trainers would look at what they do. I mean, look at how Mystico was treated, and maybe there's more of an openness to that post Vince. But I think if you're going to do something like NXT UK, there has to be a revenue return there, right? Like, that's why NXT UK doesn't exist anymore, because there wasn't so much incremental revenue to get out of running NXT UK. It was just another training center, and it was probably a lot of expense and not a lot of return on that investment.
Still waiting on NXT Europe.
Still waiting. I check my watch every day, and no NXT Europe yet. Maybe tomorrow.
Getting those ducks in a row. Some TV notes from the past couple of nights. We got Raw numbers to discuss, and the show did 1,796,000 viewers and doing a 0.56 in the 18 to 49 demographic off the top of my head, as I don't have these stats ready.
0.56.
This was number one on all of television on Monday.
It was definitely number one in 18 to 49. Yes. I think on all of television, yes, because it's only cable news that's in the running.
Yes, some of these numbers that you see on a nightly basis. I mean, when there's not something big going on, like, it's a pretty low bar to become number one these days. But WWE is still commanding for whatever reason. In Canada on Monday night, this was the fourth largest Raw number of the year on Monday for just what I thought I saw as like a run-of-the-mill show that I don't know how much was pushing people towards this past Monday's Raw. But yes, there you go. Beat The Bachelor, beat American Ninja Warrior, and something called the 1% Club.
Gutfeld with an exclamation point. Take that, Gutfeld.
Well, that was Raw on Monday. Collision. This was the tape show from Cardiff, Wales. They did 442,000 and a 0.13 in the demo. Bit of a slide in the 18 to 34 category. And then SmackDown on Friday, 2,050,000 viewers, which was their lowest since June. But again, first in the demo with a 0.56 on Friday night for the episode from Washington, D.C. So WWE.
The thing I noticed when I do these reports, which I do, here's a plug. I don't just put TV ratings in these reports that are on patreon.com/Wrestlenomics, but I put attendance analysis in there using data from WrestleTix and comparing this given attendance to all the different attendances in this particular location. And I'm always struck by, how they put for Washington, D.C. for SmackDown over 13,000 tickets distributed for this event. And it's been a long time since there's been, a comparison like that has not been, up compared to the prior visit there. So if we look at this for SmackDown, for example, it just happens to be a few hundred higher than the last SmackDown they did in 2023 at Capital One Arena. In any case, have you heard the new the big news today? The Nielsen universe estimates. The new Nielsen universe estimates have gone into effect as of Monday.
And what does
Breaking
that mean?
news. That means, have you ever calculated and converted? So, sometimes we see the number of viewers in the demo, 18 to 49. It'll be something like, let's say for Raw, it was 755,000 viewers just in the demo. How do you convert that to a rating, which is what we're more familiar with talking about, a 0.56 in the demo? You have to divide that by something called the universe estimate. And it has changed. It changes every year. And we have those new universe estimates out there. So big news. We're no longer dividing by 1318.8. We're now dividing by like 1340.1 or something. So exciting times.
This is huge. So
it's huge. It's huge for me, yes. Because I have to do the math.
Well, that's a cause for celebration that update is coming. So everyone be aware and be ready for Wrestlenomics with its updated math to give you all the data, all the analysis.
Yes,
What
we
do you
have a
think is
couple
going
questions.
What do you think about today's counter? Do you believe this is a legitimate estimate of how many people are listening right now?
No, I think the X viewers are fake. I think that's like maybe the number of people who are seeing the top bar where it says Post Wrestling and Wrestlenomics is broadcasting this. I can't imagine that there are 1,300 people watching this right now.
Everyone with a heartbeat is being counted. But we have a few heartbeats here sending us some super chats. We go to Jumanji Hunter. You said for the Royal Rumble in San Antonio got a $69 million return on investment. Doesn't a $500,000 site fee seem low in that case? Is that $69 million overinflated?
If not for that last part of that question, I would think we have discovered Nick Khan's burner account here. So the thing about
should the Royal Rumble be generating $69 million from the city of San Antonio?
Is it really generating that much? So what I do have
economic impact, we should state. It's like
yes.
Not pure cash that they are getting here, but yes,
no.
I think he understands what this is.
So the most obvious math to do, I think, is to say, okay, the Royal Rumble is going to generate tens of thousands of people to travel in who don't live in the area, who are going to need a place to stay, a hotel to stay at. And you can sort of do the math and estimate how many incremental hotel stays are we going to have because of that. And you have that benefit, that presumably incremental benefit to the hotel businesses that are in the area. But then also, if you've ever stayed at a hotel, you see the cover price or whatever when you book the hotel, and then you go to check out and it's like 15% higher or whatever because the tax and the luxury tax happens. And that goes straight
WWE Royal Rumble with a fee attached to it, $6.85 on your hotel bill.
Someday that'll be there too. But I think so. There's that. So what I should say too is I have a copy of the economic impact study that was done ahead of time. That was, I want to say, something in the range of, it was over $10 million, but under 20 million. And even that, right? We're talking about somewhere between 10 and 20 times the return on the investment of $500,000. What I'll say about the economic impact studies is they are basically always commissioned by governments or entertainment companies like WWE who they want good news. They want to be told that this event was awesome for the local area. I don't really doubt that it made the $575,000 or whatever it was back and then some. Do I believe it was $69 million? That might be high.
You don't think that they could get a figure and they're like, guys, it couldn't be that much. Let's redo the math here. I think there's no way we did this.
Yeah.
So another one here from Jumanji Hunter. Once the TV deal is done are AEW's rights up?
I think so. It's
been a quiet story. Is anyone covering this? Could be a big deal. He says, once the TV deal is done, which he adds, I imagine with a considerable increase, do you see there being a difference in how AEW is run in the back end? I guess like the operations of the company?
Staff and
Right.
I would think so. It depends on what it is, of course. I mean, this is a company that's almost certainly running at a substantial loss, probably tens of millions of dollars every year. Maybe a new deal, if it's something like $200 million average annual value, that'll put him into the black. And that'll change budgets, certainly, right? I don't think you can really make real financial plans until you have a clear idea of what kind of money you're going to be making in 2025. It'd be really an interesting question to, if we could, inject everybody with truth serum and talk to, say, the AEW CFO and say, well, what are your financial plans right now? Because your deal ends in December, and you
much like Jim Crockett, we are investing in private jets.
You might be making a lot of money. You might be making a moderate amount of money. You might be profitable. You might not be. You might be really profitable. I don't know. So what are their financial planning? What is their financial planning like? I don't know. I'll say that, I have every reason to believe that AEW is a much smaller company than WWE, certainly in terms of staff. And a lot of that has to do with the startup nature of AEW. They just don't really have as a developed set of staff. And maybe that'll change once they have more sturdy a financial foundation under them.
Do you think my prediction of our kind of the goal line we had placed around Labor Day? Next weekend is Labor Day.
Yeah, it's time to. So, not this coming weekend, the weekend after that. So the second episode that we do at 1:00, everybody will be at 1:00 next week. The one that we do that will actually be running head to head with Mark Shapiro, doing a conference talk somewhere.
Oh my gosh, really?
If we don't have a TV deal by then, is it all over for AEW?
How many other options are there? I mean, at that point, I think we're just going to have to shelve this company at that point. Well, like it's over.
It's getting to the point where, like, I don't know. I mean, I don't doubt that there's going to be a deal, but like, why is this taking so long to announce? I don't know. I would love to know the story. Well, Tony Khan will never tell us, though.
That would be wonderful if he just spent like 20 minutes on Dynamite. He just takes us through all the negotiations, all the twists and turns, the Kathleen Finch news, the trip to Paris, and he just breaks it all down. And then the exclusive window ended, and we just got
Did they talk to anybody else?
Offers. Well, Jason Powell tried last week. He did, to his credit, try to get that out of Tony Khan. He did not want to speak about any other entities on the conference call last week. But yeah, it's obviously everyone's eyes are on this deal. I don't think people are questioning if this deal is going to come, but certainly, like, the focus is on as we're entering this final couple of months of the year as well.
And this is presumably not an issue for advertisers. Like, you would, I understand the advertising space is sold like a quarter in advance or something like that. We're coming up on that, I guess, on September 30th, I guess, would be a quarter away from the new year. Yeah, I don't know. Yeah,
they do have that anniversary edition of Dynamite, but you can announce it anytime you want. It really, once you have a deal ready to announce, I would just make a big deal out of it, and we'll see what it is at that point and what we learn about this television deal. But that is all for us. So again, I want to thank Neal Flanagan for dropping by, and you for sending in your super chats and following along. Again, beginning next Wednesday, we will be starting at 1 p.m. Eastern time each and every Wednesday moving forward. So note that, much like when Raw moved to 8 p.m., we know there's going to be a learning curve for people. They're going to be tuning in 2 hours late, but in time, we know everyone will find the new start time.
You'll have to brace our media distribution partners when we have our pre-show meeting with them and let them know that there's going to be some growing pains here. But our audience will follow us wherever we go.
That's it. All right, that's it for us, everyone. Thanks for tuning in. Go check out all of Brandon's work breaking down the Royal Rumble 2023 records and a story that he reported on for Post Wrestling about a lawsuit. Right. The lawsuit. I skipped over this, but
I'm a Post Wrestling writer now.
You know what? We're going after.
Finally made it.
Yes, the UFC filed a lawsuit, and they have launched a lawsuit against a barbershop/bar in Key West, Florida, Beards and Brews, which allegedly aired UFC 298 a couple of months ago without the required commercial license. So, folks, beware if you are a bar or barbershop out there that is not paying for the rights to air a UFC broadcast. They will find you, and UFC is seeking up to $110,000 per defendant in this case. So Brandon is following this story, and it's an interesting one, and not the first time UFC has been very aggressive when it comes to unlawful airings of their pay-per-view content in commercial establishments.
Yeah. As promised, Dana White is coming for you if you're stealing his pay-per-view. I understand that has been a thorny issue for him in the past.
Yeah, could you imagine Mark Shapiro knocking at your facility, at your bar, and what's that on in the background there? I mean, they are on top of things. All right.
They do have in this lawsuit, they have a screenshot of a Facebook post advertising this.
Oh.
And it's unclear if the lawsuit that UFC has filed, it makes it unclear if they believe that the stream was actually pirated or if they just paid for a run-of-the-mill pay-per-view purchase, which is a lot less expensive than the commercial purchase if you're running a bar and playing UFC, which you can do, but you have to pay for the commercial license.
Yeah, and it is not cheap. I haven't looked at it in some time what the rates were, but it's a very significant undertaking to spend the money to legally show this at your establishment. Like, I just know in Toronto, especially during like the peak of bar business, that was so many places were covering these UFC events, and a lot of them had to put on just an admission fee to be able to recoup the amount it took. Like, it's a significant amount that these bars have to spend to air these pay-per-views. But some people try to go the other route, but man, they're on top of things.
Yes.
So check out that story, postwrestling.com. We're back here next Wednesday at 1 p.m. Eastern time. I am back with Wei Ting late tonight after Dynamite from Champaign, Illinois, the home of Tony Khan. And Brandon will be back this coming Sunday at 11 a.m. Eastern time, which is the first Sunday of the month. So if my calendar is accurate, that means a free edition of Wrestlenomics Radio for everybody.
Yeah. And Bash in Berlin is the day before, so we're clear of that. Free for everybody this Sunday.
Yeah, thankfully there's no AEW pay-per-view this Sunday, as there was supposed to be originally.
And they moved all out to the following Saturday.
Yeah, we get a one weekend reprieve from AEW shows. But there you go. We'll talk about All Out next week and whatever else is happening in the world of professional wrestling and the MMA bar business. But that is it. We will talk to you next week.